Hello and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Bern. I'm your host, Eric Miller, joined today by an awesome progressive from the great state of California running for the state assembly for District 25, Alex Lee. How you doing, Alex?
Great. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for taking some time to chat with me. District 25, I'll pull up a map. It's Santa Clara, San Jose, kind of the heart of Silicon Valley, which plays into a little bit of your policy issues that you're looking to focus on, but just kind of a pulse check. What's the state of the race from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the state of the race is looking really good for us. I am a Democrat running a Democrat area. We are up against a Republican who doesn't take any clean money pledges like I do. I don't take any money from corporations, fossil fuels, or police unions, but my opponent doesn't do the same. So we're not taking anything for granted, in the last week of election.
Right on. Yeah. Naturally, you gotta run through the finish line, as they say, right? You are endorsed by the who's who of the progressive movement: Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna, Jane Kim, Zoe Lofgren, Working Families, Our Revolution, San Francisco Berniecrats, API Caucus, firefighters, nurses, teachers.
That's right.
The incumbent has endorsed you. He's moving on to another race, which is always a fantastic sign. I watched an interview with you talking to another candidate in another district, and you guys were talking specifically about what you just raised, the no corporate pledge, no corporate money pledge. And in the primary, you made it through a tough primary. There were you were one of seven, and you made it through, right?
Yeah, one of the 7 Democrats. There's 9 people total. I'm sorry, one of 8 Democrats, including myself. So 7 Democrats, yeah.
Were you the only sort of clean money candidate?
That's right. Yeah. I was the only one to have pledged not to take a lot of different special interest money. I won't go through all the long lists right now, but in the primary, we were outspent 15-1 just by one other candidate who was right behind me. So we never totaled up all the special interest money that came through, but it was a very tough race. The resources were stacked against us. A lot of establishment people lined up behind our opponents, but in the end, our stronger progressive grassroots campaign, I think, won the day.
Here, here. Boy, what a great sign that is, right? That's inspiring. And what's is it Silicon Valley? Like, that would conjure anyone not familiar, who are the most insidious donors, if you will, in that district?
Yeah, well, in the Bay Area and in Silicon Valley, we're home to a lot of big companies, right? Apple's here. Tesla is in my district, the Tesla itself. So the factory is in my district. We have tons and tons of tech companies. Uber and Lyft are also in the area as well. And they do play into these races. They contribute through their special interests PACs and organizations, or sometimes more blatantly directly. And I don't take any of that money here because I just don't believe in having that kind of influence at all.
Yeah. Have you seen that? Did you see that in the primary? And then once you made it through, I mean, you're full-throated about that principally. But I would assume that they would still try, right? And what does that look like when they try?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure in the primary they did any direct contributions. They might have done it through some, organizations when they call themselves different names and they kind of, mix their money through other places. But I know they are active in races in this area, because there's state Senate races, there's county races and local races where they're very active right now, because given it's the general election time. And in California right now, we have Prop 22, which is a huge tech company buyout. They're trying to buy out, carve out in law right now, and they're they're funneling $200 million right now. And you see some of the ripple effects down here too in local races as well. Luckily, they don't seem to be so interested in my race right now, but that could always change,
Right. So you haven't seen any of that firsthand. I'm always curious what that looks like. I'm assuming, okay.
Yeah,
I
definitely see it for all the so I endorse a lot of other corporate free candidates down here, or within my district, or very adjacent to it, and some of them just get pummeled with attack ads. And the candidate you mentioned earlier on the call I had, he's getting pummeled with business money and corporate money, and they're just flooding with attack ads and negative mailers, or negative ads. Fortunately, my race has been very clean. I haven't had to throw any attacks on anyone. No one's had to throw attacks on me, so I think it's lucky in that regard.
Good. Yeah, I didn't do a ton of research on the Republican opponent. I just assume he's a typical terrible Republican that takes back money, right?
Typical conservative,
Okay. So touching on the Silicon Valley thing, on your on your website, and it's votealexlee.com. You know, like you said, you take small dollar donations, and they go a long way in races like this, right? You know, I've had a lot of candidates on that are actually almost everyone, if not everyone, is a clean money candidate that I featured. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to them.
Yeah.
And you know, the small dollar donations go a long way in races like yours, right? And I keep saying this, and I don't mean to single out Jamie Harrison or Amy McGrath, but they don't need any more money, right? If you're inspired to send $20 to them, don't send it to somebody like Alex, right? It goes much further in, you know, sort of local races like this, grassroots races. So it's votealexlee.com. I'll mention it a few more times. You mentioned Silicon Valley, and on your website you talk about traffic and transportation. So I'm going to pull up the district just so we get a look at it, but talk about, you know, what that looks like and what is the issue and what is your proposal to help remedy traffic and public transportation issues in your district.
Yeah, well, any American will know that, barring very few examples, public transportation in this country sucks. It's especially true in the Bay Area. If your end destination is not San Francisco, downtown San Francisco, or downtown San Jose, you probably are out of luck in a lot of regards. So right now, especially during coronavirus, there have been a lot of proposed cuts to services, bus and rail alike. And we are doing all our best right now to save the services we have. We have a local ballot measure just to save some of the train service. But my proposal and my vision is that we dedicate more of our public funding and more funding towards expansion of our transit system. So it's not just a commuter point A to point B, but also making sure it's more accessible and having greater coverage. Because the real problem, especially in my area, in our area, is that like I said, if you don't want to go to San Francisco, you're kind of screwed with the bus lines and the rail system. Mm-hmm. I myself live right next to a rail station, but it is so inconvenient to get anywhere because the coverage is just so terrible to the transit system. And if we can make sure that our transit system works for everyone and gets everyone where they need to go in a convenient manner, we can really cut down our carbon emissions by getting people out of their cars, right? So it's going to be a huge effort that we need to do, and it's going to be my contribution to the California's version of Green New Deal through transportation and land use.
Wonderful. Yeah, people think about traffic and they just think of the human inconvenience of it or whatever. Oh, yeah. It's a caricature about California, but what you're saying is obviously it has a major impact on the environment, right? And that's public transportation is one of the many solutions in the Green New Deal. Since I have the district up, I always like to let candidates brag on your district. So tell me what you love about District 25, and what should people know about it.
Well, District 25, I think, is really representative of California, if not the Bay Area as well, in its diversity and its economic strength. So Assembly District 25 is only one of 2 Asian Pacific Islander plurality districts. It's about upper 40% population Asian Pacific Islanders, of course, which I belong to that community as well. And it's really, really awesome. Another awesome thing, especially as we're looking at the voter turnout right now, is that the average age of the voter is actually somewhere around 50 or under, which is unusual when you talk about districts where you think, oh, it's generally older voters and generally older people, and not just talking about population, right? It's people who register to vote and who do vote. My demographics actually skew on the younger side. In fact, the second largest block of voters, just voters alone, is 18 to 34. And that's the second largest population of voters. And I'm happy to say that, almost 40% of them have already turned in their ballot. So we're looking really good. And, it's a cross-section of a lot of great things. It's so diverse because we have a lot of great recent immigrants as well who contribute to the tech industry and the local economy as well as a lot of long-term residents who I talk to who used to have family farms, and a lot of streets are named after their family. So where I live, kind of near the southern end of the district, the part in the San Jose, not in where the mountains are, there's actually a lot of streets that are named after a certain family, and I would go talk to that family, and they're like, yeah, this place used to be our ranch or our orchard, and that's what happened. So San Jose itself used to actually be a big agricultural area until only in the last half century it changed. Okay. So those are some cool things about it. I also have 2 counties in my mind.
So, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I also have 2 counties. I have Alameda County and Santa Clara County. Alameda County have the cities of Fremont and Newark in the northern half, and then the southern half is Santa Clara County. So it's a lot of great fun representing 2 counties of people and all their interests as well. So those are cool things about my district.
Yeah, was the some of this is natural, federal forest lands and public
Mhm.
lands and stuff, I assume. Was this impacted by the fires?
Oh yeah, yeah. So
Right.
this zone you're looking at, which is all the mountain kind of area that doesn't have city, is actually very close to where, or very closely modeling the shape of the SCU fire, which at a time was the second largest fire in California. But now we had a fresh round of fires, and that's completely the record is completely shattered again. So yeah, all those hills were actually ablaze only a couple months ago.
Yeah. So have you studied that, forest management and how to, you know, uh, do fire prevention and so forth? And what are your thoughts on that or strategies?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The long-term strategy, of course, is to really reduce our impact on global climate change, right? That's the real driving force of all these extreme weather patterns. But on the short term, on the disaster response side, we really want to work with CAL FIRE and firefighters and also indigenous groups to figure out better land management uses, right? And how to better control brushes and stuff. Fortunately, a lot of the fires in the air surrounding Bay Area resulted really in very few casualties. In SCU, this fire that came here, there was no casualties or property damage, luckily. But we have to be focused on the big picture of reducing our footprint on climate change, as well as short-term land use and mitigation strategies.
Great. Yeah, that's a big issue in the States. So while I'm here, votealexlee.com is your website.
It's me.
Again, you can donate here. There's this handsome fella right here. You can donate. You can volunteer. I'm assuming you have text banking, phone banking. People can
Yep.
jump in and help out. There's a form down here. So, get involved. And, Alex's issues are here. So, go check them out. Your list of endorsements, which is longer than my arm, is on there. So, go check out votealexlee.com and get involved. Like I said, a small dollar donation goes a long way on a grassroots campaign like this. And it also sends the message that, that this type of campaign can win, right? Like you did in the primary. If you do the same in the general, you will have, David at a lot of Goliaths, right? And made it
Yes.
to the finish line. So
Yeah.
Godspeed on that. On your website, another priority that you mentioned is the housing crisis. And I'm assuming that was you were framing that even pre-pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Now we have an eviction crisis and stuff. So, is that a disproportionate problem in your district? And if so, what's your approach to address it?
Absolutely. Yeah. The Bay Area, even pre-pandemic, the housing affordability crisis was a huge, huge problem. Just like every metropolitan area, it's way too expensive to live in the community you perhaps have grown up in, like myself. Even before the pandemic, 1 in 5 people in my home county were paying more than 50% of their income just on housing. It's really out of control down here. Things have obviously changed in a lot of interesting ways with the pandemic, right? But I think housing security has become even more pressing. So that's why it's going to be my actually top concern. One big policy that we really want to champion when we hopefully get elected is social housing, which is basically the public-driven approach to building affordable housing, taking it out of complete control of the market. Because right now the market has a monopoly, or for-profit developers in the market have free reign over our housing stock, and they really control exactly what gets produced, right? They negotiate with the cities. But if we could have the public option decide, well, this is the kind of project we're going to develop, and this is the kind of neighborhood we're going to create, that would put us in the driver's seat, right? Without relying on that. So we're really going to be big champions of public social housing, and I think that's going to be a huge way to address the housing crisis.
Great. I imagine the Goliath in that fight is development lobbies, right? I imagine, especially in the Bay Area, there's probably prime real estate. There's probably gentrification happening.
A lot of that.
Tenancy issues. How do you fight that fight? What's the state assembly look like? Will you have allies in that fight? What's it looking like?
Yeah, well, I'm very optimistic that there will be other progressive voices who join us. Perhaps they haven't been cut from the same challenging path that I have been on, but I think there'll be a lot of allies. Like one thing to bring up, because you brought up how my endorsements list is like longer than your arm. In the primary, it was roughly probably shorter than your arm, but we had the endorsements of all the local progressive clubs, but not all the fancy, statewide and national organizations at that point yet. So it really makes a difference when we're building the movement down here in the district, and I think that will percolate and become a good model for other legislators and hopeful future legislators that are progressive.
That's great. Yeah, like San Francisco Berniecrats, I'm sure was with you from the beginning, I would think, right? Yeah, whereas more party-oriented ones probably came on in the general, which is a good sign, right? Sometimes they shy away from, candidates that don't take corporate PAC money. To be completely honest, not only do they sometimes they shy away, sometimes they get obstructive even. So
I've certainly gotten some weird looks and comments when they say, "Hey, you don't take that money." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't," and they're like, "You're just making it harder on yourself." I'm like, "Yeah, I know."
Well, it's a principled thing. It's an admirable thing, right? You're not, anyone in your district will be blessed to have you represent them, because I just met you, but I can't imagine you're going to get into the state house and then suddenly start taking money from, Uber or whomever, right? You're in fact, in that other conversation, and I wish I had the link or I'd post it in the comments. You talked about proposals that you want to put forth about campaign finance reform when should you make it in. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first bill that we hope to introduce is actually to make all California candidates corporate free. I'm hopefully going to introduce a bill to ban corporate contributions to all candidates, local, all the way from state and local down. And we're hopefully going to do that so that everyone can be corporate free. Because the real crux of it is, yes, in the end, these corporations, because we live in Citizens United era with the Supreme Court rulings, they will find all these crazy, committees and PACs to funnel money through. But if they're not going directly to the candidate, at least that does stop some candidates who I think have more nefarious intentions, because ultimately this game is about who has money enough in their initial war chest, right? And if you can cut off that source and say, you have to go back to your community and say, can you raise the money, right? Because I've seen far too often people stand on, on this foundation of sand where they rely on all these corporate special interests, but they never go talk to the people in the community. And that's a similar story that happened in my race, where it's like you spend so much money courting special interest money, especially corporate special interest money with lobbyists. Right. You don't go out and talk to people who give you $5, $20, which, isn't as fancy sounding or amazing, but it adds up, and that's what we're lucky to have in our campaign. We're just hundreds of people donating money, and it got to the point where people are donating, as little as $3, and it still made a difference because that all adds up in the law of large numbers. This was really important.
Yeah. So votealexlee.com, go throw in $3 or $30 or $300, right? You mentioned a thing on your website too that you focus on is fighting for marginalized communities, and you mentioned it's an Asian Pacific, the population is greater than most, right? So I wonder what does institutional racism look like in a community or a district like yours? And, what do you mean when you're talking about fighting for marginalized communities and so forth?
Yeah, when it especially comes to the Asia Pacific Islander community and institutional racism, you still have the typical, especially during the pandemic era, your typical on the street kind of racism, right? Where you have someone who's very belligerent, will say very terrible things. That's still very commonplace even in a community like this. We tell you to go back to China, or you're responsible for coronavirus. That still happens. But at institutional level, what it looks like is a lot of our local governments are still very much predominantly white and cishet men, right? Which is kind of strange when you think about the population makeup. And at the same time, when you don't have those same people either working in government or elected in government, you also have a lot of cultural and language barriers, which I think our counties have been much more progressive on these issues and being more amenable to people. But there's still that barrier, right? Because when you don't see someone that you can relate to in a cultural context or a racial context, perhaps, it's hard to believe in them. And sometimes our turnout is lower than we want to, right? Or engagement even on these issues. So especially incredibly important issues like land use, right? Where a project will go, where a transit line will go. Our communities are sadly kind of absent on these things. And these are all forces that, or all issues I hope to be working on to expand that access to people so they feel more engaged.
Great. I mean, you're younger than I am, but can you talk about if it's trending in the right direction at the very least?
In terms of cultural inclusion, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think, compared to a lot of other states or even other counties, I think we're doing a great job at doing these things, but there can always be room for improvement. And I think, yeah, I think there's definitely a lot we can do more.
Okay, great. The other thing that you say on your website, which it doesn't get talked about nearly enough, is lowering the voting age.
Yeah.
Talk about your view on that.
Yeah, so excitingly in California right now on the ballot, we have Proposition 18, which is kind of funny. Proposition 18 lowers the voting age for certain 17-year-olds who would be eligible to vote in the general election. They can vote in the primary. It's kind of a weird loop. I would have preferred just lowering the voting age in general, but it's the thing they put on the ballot. In general, I really believe in having as great of a universal voting franchise as possible. We also have on the ballot Proposition 17, which gives the right to vote back to parolees. So people even parole right now in California cannot vote, which is pretty crazy to me. So really expanding the voter franchise, I think, is always better.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's wonderful. So you mentioned Prop 22, Prop 17, Prop 18.
Yeah, kind of.
Are there, just in a nutshell, what's the right vote on those? Yes, no, yes, no. Which one is 22 vote yes or vote no?
Yeah. Funny enough, on my social media, especially on Twitter, I posted my proposition guide. So if anyone is interested, go to my social media, you can look at it. But I would definitely say yes on Prop 17, 18, and then no on Prop 22.
Okay.
I think for most numbers are, but
right. Yeah. So if you're voting in California, pull this up, pause it, and play the video while you're in the booth, and Alex will have the answer.
Yeah.
Or go to your social media. Let's talk a little bit more about Green New Deal and the principles of that, right? Again, be in the heart of Silicon Valley, right? Like what, just talk about, how you would like to see that sort of implemented, I guess, in your district, nationally, and then take it out to a global level.
Oh, absolutely. I think California is positioned uniquely to be a leader in realizing the principles of the Green New Deal. The federal level, let's hope and pray things will change and then we'll finally get to that level. But California, with their Democratic super ultra majority, especially hopefully after this November, we really are in a position to really put our money where our mouth is. So I think in California, especially, right, green energy, no brainer, right? Sustainable green energy, no brainer. That's something you have to fight in DC. But we also need to incorporate all the other aspects of fighting climate change. And my contribution to the California Green New Deal hopefully will be in the terms of how we build our communities and how we get people around them, right? That's transit and housing. Because unarguably, if we get more people out of their cars, that reduces our carbon footprint, right? Because transportation, especially cars, single occupancy cars, is perhaps the highest source of carbon emissions. And if we can build a reliable system of transportation, that will really cut down on it. And at the same time, if we build buildings and homes closer to each other and more efficiently, that will cut down on energy use in so many other ways. So land use and transportation are going to be my contributions to it. And we have to really think about how climate change intersects with every other aspect of society, right? In every society or every aspect. And hopefully, when we accomplish this in the Bay Area and in California, we can be a model for other states to adopt it. Hoping that, in the case of the federal government doesn't take the lead on this, as it has in the last 4 years, we can be models state by state and really show it. Because I've even talked to people from traditionally red states, right? More rural areas that have just as much interest in protecting the natural environment and protecting their livelihoods. And they would be very supportive of these issues. It's just how we frame these things and how we make sure that it's an equitable future for everyone.
Yeah, well said. And I had a candidate from Wisconsin earlier today running for state house, Chris Marion, and she has a farming background.
Oh, wow.
And she has a great perspective on, about how farming needs to be on the front line in fighting a climate crisis, right? You mentioned, farming historically was part of your district. I'm not sure what the footprint is nowadays, but having all of these parties at the table, having a just transition, multi-pronged approach, I think all of that is incredible. So, Godspeed on that. Banning fracking, you're in favor. So let's talk a little bit of presidential politics, right? So God willing, and I don't know why I say that because I'm an atheist, just have it. God willing, Joe Biden wins, right? We've heard people like Bernie Sanders and I think Jamal Bowman already start talking about, how we sort of lean in on the first 100 days. We make them accountable for, raising the living wage or minimum wage and so forth, right? Banning fracking is one of those things where the last 2-3 weeks, they just can't seem to stop bragging about how, we're not going to ban fracking. And every time I hear it, I'm sure like you and millions others, we just cringe. Oh God, right? So, what do we do about that? I mean, you're focused on state level politics, but obviously you have, a lot of insight on this. What do we do about that? How do we lean in on them, come 2021 and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, it's particularly frustrating, right, to hear the vice presidential candidate who's from my home state of California to say we're not going to ban fracking. I understand why they're doing this. I don't agree with it. I understand the reasoning of why they're trying to do this, but we do have the impetus on all of us to not just say, well, November 3rd's over, Joe Biden will be president-elect, wash our hands clean. The movement, the progressive movement, especially those who have believed in Bernie Sanders, need to keep the pressure up, right? Because we can't let Joe fulfill the promise of just saying everything will just go back as it was 4 years before, right? That's not where we want to go. We need to make sure that our lives and everyone's lives are demonstratively different and improved. So really at the state level, we need to be pressuring them on every front. I mean, the first priority right now has to be obviously on a just COVID recovery, because the federal government completely just has lost interest in that. They shoved through a new court justice before they could even do a new coronavirus stimulus or any sort of recovery. So that has to be top of the top of business. And then we need to keep them first on their promises that they made, and then secondly to make sure that they're actually keeping progressives at the table, right? Because I don't want to see Republicans in the cabinet or Republican advisors and this unity thing. The unity thing makes sense when we're defeating Trump, but it doesn't quite make sense to me when we're supposed to be making real tangible policy. We elected, our hope was we elected a Democratic president and he should be representing Democratic values, not the other side, right? So we need to keep the pressure on every single person, every state.
Yeah. Every time I see a story where he's vetting John Kasich or whomever, I'm like, oh my God, look, we have such a bench of progressive candidates that are, representatives and, policymakers that are just chomping at the bit and, would be an appropriate fit and would make progress and would deliver on the promises, right? Would have heard the next, if they get this opportunity and they fail to deliver on even the most minimal things, the next Trump-like figure is going to be, he's not going to be as dumb. Right. And, it's going to come, there's going to be a reckoning. So,
I always think back to Democrats need to learn from our at least recent past, because if you recall from just the Obama years, even the less than ideal amount of change that happened in the first term resulted in the Tea Party revolution. Right. And you don't want to see a souped up steroid Tea Party revolution again, and they take control of Congress. So we need to make sure that the first 2 years and the first 100 days, we have to nail it, or else they will come back even harder. We don't want a even worse Trump, like you said, we don't want a more intelligent, more charismatic, more nefarious one. At least, the only solace I have with this president is that he has no real interest in being president. He just kind of likes being, he doesn't like the job. He likes being the president. Right. But imagine if we had someone who was much more dedicated to changing policy, who actually thought about these things.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, you talked about the relative age of your district, right? I always look at, Sunrise Movement, March for Our Lives, these youth movements, these youth-driven movements, they're not, please share your perspective on it. You are younger than I, right? I don't imagine many of them are going to be what is kind of known as the brunch Democrats, where they're going to go back to, their privilege and everything's okay come February, right? What can you share about that? I'm assuming your volunteers are all young, all inspired, all motivated. Can you give us a profile of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of great activists down here in our district as well, including Sunrise Hubs and March for Our Lives organizations. And indeed, yes, we have a lot of young volunteers. I mean, we have volunteers from, I think we had a middle school to college age, and we even have people in their 70s who came and walked for us, which is really awesome. So it's a really multi-generational movement we're trying to build down here. And I do agree with you, people aren't going to, put down their activist hats or their signs right as the election is over. There are a lot of local issues and a lot of people we need to keep pressuring. The same mentality that we have with pressuring Joe Biden to keep up the progress has to be said of Democrats down here as well. I mean, evade accountability myself. I need to be accountable to people and do the promises I say I will do. But we need to keep that promise up. And I'll be working with activists on the ground here in California as much as possible to pressure everyone and work together collaboratively. Because really what we need to make that bridge between is people in elected office and people in direct action or activists need to be working hand in hand rather than historically, right? It's one against the other, which is not constructive. But imagine when you can have both those together. And really, I think that is the spirit of the progressive movement, where our activism turns into power in office, and then vice versa, and those both of them become more powerful.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point, right? And if you're not delivering on those public demands, then you're held accountable in the next election cycle. That's how it ought to be. You know, Ro Khanna, who endorsed you, you know, has monthly town hall meetings, and he openly says, you know, challenge me. If I lose, I lose. That's what democracy is, right? That's, you know, that's incredible. If every representative took that position, we'd be far better off.
I think so. But he has a very nasty Republican coming after him who very much annoys me.
Does he?
Yes.
Yeah, that's one of the other reasons I'm hoping Biden and Harris win, because I have an expectation that Ro Khanna may run for her seat.
Yeah, it's very possible. You know, that's the talk of the town if that happens.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. If you paid close attention, you could see his socials, like he stepped up at a point in time, which was very cool. Well, Alex, you know, anything policy related or district specific that you want to mention that we didn't talk about?
Yeah. Oh, yes. So the thing we kind of talked about earlier is about increasing engagement with our community. There's another bill that we're hoping to work on soon, is to make sure that, I'm not sure if this happens in your home state, but during the coronavirus pandemic, we have seen public government meetings, right? Committee meetings in the legislature or city council meetings go digital or go remote, right? Before, you had to stand in line 2 p.m. on a Tuesday to go talk to your city hall and say, this is a bad project or something like that, you know, and voice your opinion, which is completely impractical, right? It rules a whole section of people. Right. But now we're allowing people to do it remotely. Right. And I'm hoping to put a bill in so that is a permanent thing and not just a, you know, crisis-based response, because that is one huge way we can make sure more people are engaged. There's more transparency. There's more engagement there, rather than people, you know, everything is open, right? But really, if you're putting this huge barrier in front of people, there's no way they can really engage. So that's a huge bill we're going to work on too.
That's great. Wow, that's really good. How about anyone else running on your slate in your district, in your area, that you want to make mention of, like-minded folks?
Oh, absolutely. So in my hometown of Milpitas, running for Milpitas City Council is Tiffany Vong. She is a progressive, backed by a lot of similar people as me, corporate-free candidate running for city council. So if you live in Milpitas, please vote for her. And also in Fremont, running for school board, my good friend Lucy Shen is also running for school board, also corporate free. Both of these candidates that I just mentioned are also corporate free, and they're also my age or younger. So we're all, well, I'm personally 25 and running for District 25, which is what I always say now. But these are young progressive candidates who are going to reshape the political landscape.
Amazing. Great. Yeah, so November 3rd, again, it's votealexlee.com. Go make a donation. We're in the home stretch, you know, take an hour, take 2 hours, make some calls, you know, help get Alex over the finish line. There's a Republican, you know, it's generally a blue district, but you can't be too sure, right? So, you know, he could use any little help, just to make sure that, you know, that we get him on the California State House. And, you know, Godspeed. I can't wait to talk to you and, you know, call you Representative Lee in the future. You know, good luck, or Assemblyman, I guess it would be. You know, good luck on November 3rd. And yeah, thanks for taking some time to chat with me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the Daily Bern. Really, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.